Thank you for tuning in to Stampscaping 101. This is my final piece of a series of three titled Castaway. And this is a scene that, for me, kind of represents kind of survival and kind of making use of kind of the hand you've been dealt. I have this little character in here that's supposed to represent the, this guy that's been thrown overboard in this horrible scenario of the storm and at sea, and here he is, probably years later, grown up a little bit, and like the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, he's learned how to utilize a spear to do his fishing. But anyways, this was a really fun scene for me to not only compose, but to finish off in the spirit of staying with my Castaway theme, trying to make it work with my two other scenes. The first one being, well, I did this one first, but then I did this one right here. Ship kind of off to sea, to the new world, new available opportunities and whatnot, and unforeseen perils at sea and whatnot, and someone that's kind of grown up as a castaway out on some deserted island, tropical island, and able to survive off the land. I wanted to make this final scene kind of warmer and somewhat visually inviting as a location that would be pleasant to visit, because after all it had to be somewhat hospitable for this person to kind of figure out how to live off the land. There's this ship out there kind of stuck up on a reef or a sandbar or whatever, capsized, sole survivor, maybe, I don't know. But, I don't know, I wanted to bring in some warmer tones and a lot of kind of little shimmery, little ripples and sparkles in the water to, I don't know, make the scene a little bit more friendly, I guess, in terms of the emotional quality of it. So, quite a long scene. It's a half page, so quite big, and I really wanted to spend quite a bit of time on this one, being that it's the final piece of three, so I wanted to finish strong and to really spend a lot of time in the coloring process right here. But it's a little bit complex just in terms of the size of the scene, but in terms of the number of images used, it's really not too many. There's a cloud up here, my Palm Island used twice. These rocks in here are 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's another impression over there, are all the same. Boulders with lichen small stamp, boulders with lichen large stamp right here, used twice, okay? So here's, going back to, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 stamps, and then we have our palm frond, and our snow bank right here, and then we have our little characters, little spear fisherman. Okay, now maybe there are a few more stamps than I thought. I forgot about my little pebbles down here that I put down here, and if you can see it, I stamped my little salmon fish in here in the foreground. It's not supposed to be as big as him, right? It's lower on the horizon, so, or lower on my composition, so it's supposed to represent something much closer to us, but it's just to say that, these waters are teeming with life, and if this person's kind of lived as a castaway, there has to be kind of access to an easy food source, so. Oh, I could have put round little balls up into the palm trees up there to represent coconuts or something like that too, but I don't think I'm going to do that because I don't know if I can match that black of the pad. I think if I drew in with like a little Sharpie or something like that, it would be, a darker black or something, so I thought I would stay away from doing something like that. But Anyways, a little bit of continuity between my ships. One is sailing, one is kind of listing, and this one's the shipwreck out there. So trying to create, strong enough a connection between the three pieces, in addition to the format, and to keep it different enough where each one takes on a kind of a different kind of emotional quality to them. So, all right, blabbing on and on. Just kind of thinking out loud here as I try to analyze my piece and to put into words what I just think I was thinking of when I was stamping this out too. So anyways, if you choose to watch it, I pity you because it's a really long one. Just toggle around or something like that, skip 15 minutes at a time or whatnot, and you can kind of see the scene develop. In terms of the coloring, what I really had fun doing is adding in the final touches in it, with the pigmentings and the gel pens and whatnot, and finally the fronds to kind of really anchor the piece in terms of strong compositional statement. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning into the channel. Hope you enjoy Castaway number 3. Okay, I'm back, and this is going to be the third panel in a series of 3 Castaway themed scenes. And I'm trying to compose something in my head a little bit about what it should look like in terms of a scene in itself, but also we're looking at sequential aesthetics. I want something to keep moving from scene to scene as if we were looking at, I don't know, these could represent possibly 2-page spreads or something like that as you open a book and you read some storyline or something like that. This one would be the first one, okay? It's a kind of a foggy, real misty morning, heading off into the great unknown here. The big storm and the castaway getting, thrown overboard. And this third piece, it's kind of a Robinson Crusoe castaway type of thing, will also finish off on a half-page landscape format. And I think I want to do kind of a tropical themed type of scene. And I thought I would base it around a little lone figure kind of in the distance. I don't know, I guess he's not too far away, but I don't know, I'm going to do it on one of the spearfishermen. If you've seen the movie Castaway, it's kind of you see Tom Hanks in a scene, I don't know what it was supposed to represent, several years later, and kind of the opening scene, we see this fish, the spear go into a fish, and the camera pans up and he's standing there, but that would be something like that. We're going on survival here, but I'm thinking about this, a couple sandbars here, like some dunes in the foreground, and I thought I would use this, I would go back to the seaside cove here, but I want this figure to be standing on something, so I'm thinking about some rocks out, within the waves, kind of like some rocks around some tide pools, perhaps. And I'm not sure, but I might put in some distant palm tree types of images. I'm not quite sure yet. I'm going to have to check out the composition and see how that's going first. But that's the general idea now. I don't know, I'm going to be trying to figure this out as I go, and I didn't want to extend this video out from its normally long format to an abnormally long format as I sit in there and kind of hem and haw about some design choices that I'll make, but it'll be pretty self-explanatory. When I come up with a composition, I'll explain what I did here. But I'm going to pause here and then come back to it when I'm ready to move on from the general layout and composition. Okay, I have the basic foundation down. As far as my composition goes, I have the snowbanks right here that are filling in this area. Okay, I have my boulders with lichen back here to represent some kind of tide pool types of areas. The Seaside Cove is in this whole area right here. It's probably very difficult to recognize because I've layered so much of the boulders with lichen small throughout. So that Seaside Cove is just kind of providing kind of a general foundation for the compositions, kind of all this area right in here. But then you have this area in the foreground obscured because of the snowbank, which is going to represent sand dunes. And then I have my Palm Island. Okay, and I've used it on the left and the right and left hand side here. One little subtle thing is this is my final piece, so I've placed more of it on the left hand side than the right hand side. It looks fairly symmetrical here, but there is a little bit more of this, you know, just for sequencing. It feels like it's kind of leading more from left to right that way. Just in terms of you know, the format in which we kind of read books. I don't know, that's just a subtle little thing. It's really not necessary, but I feel it kind of adds to the overall in some way. I have my little figure here, and I think that'll go right in this kind of area well, but the figure is going to be standing in water, so it'll really be kind of maybe up to his waist or so. So I'll put him somewhere in here, I think. Alright, but here's the thing that I forgot to mention in my opening kind of compositional statement, and that's one of the kind of visual themes of this three-piece sequence. Okay, we have the ship kind of heading out to sea here. It's vertical. We have it tipping over right here. Okay. So one of the things, the visual kind of themes that's creating continuity is the format. We have this long piece of paper, second long piece, but we also have the common bridge of a ship right here, okay? Now, one of the things I want to do on here is I want to kind of continue that theme with this ship here, but maybe it's sinking even more, or it's listing, you know, in this one right here. And I just want kind of part of it sticking out of the ocean. Now this ship has sails on it, so that's not ideally what I'd have, because this is supposed to represent a period of several years where the you know, this lone character is surviving, and you wouldn't have those sails in there, but I don't have another ship, so I'm just going to have to go with this one, and we're just going to have to kind of put a little bit of artistic, you know, we're going to have to bring in some artistic license into it, and just say, you know, some of that sail just remained there, so we'll just go as is. Alright, now I'm not quite sure how this is going to look, so what I'm doing is most of this ship is going to be submerged. Now, I'm not quite sure what it's going to look like right in here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a test print and see how much of this will show and what it'll look like too. I don't want too much of it, okay? So I'm wiping off a lot of this ship right here, you know, because, you know, a lot of it is in tatters, supposedly. I think I just took off too much, but I just want to see if I can get some of the hull in there. And I want it at a bit of an angle. I don't want so much of that showing up there, but let's just see what it looks like. Okay, let's see. Oops, I really moved it. Let me do that again. Kind of need to. This has a little bit of a water ripple there. I definitely don't want that part. I'll just have to see how much of this I can kind of retain and how much of it will go. I don't know. Let me see something here. Let me go ahead and color that rest of it up there. I might have to have more of it in there just for kind of visual continuity and recognition. That little piece right there, I don't know if we'd be able to tell what that is. That looks okay, I guess. We don't want it to look like some kind of shark fin or something like that, you know? Which is the thing. Or just some kind of we want it to be recognizable as the ship, but we just don't want a whole lot of it. I think, I don't know. Maybe I might have to go with a little bit more than I thought. Okay. Now this is represented water that it's kind of submerged in. Okay, let's go like this. Let's try it this way. I think this is going to be way too much, you know. That's a bit much there. It isn't too bad though, but one of the things, okay, I think what I need to do is I need to take off this area back in here. It looks too crisp of a sail, so I think if I remove some of this part of it, the submerged end, I think we might do okay. Alright, let's do it again here. This is the most complicated shipwreck I've ever stamped in my life. And the only one. Okay. Not too bad. Alright, that's what I'm going to have to go with here. Let's see if I can color it up and get that down on paper again. Let's see. Alright, taking my paper towel and... Alright. I have to make sure that I'm taking off the correct lines. You don't want to take off the wrong ones. So I can make those other sails look really tattered, maybe. And, yeah, let's just see. I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. Okay, so we'll have that. Alright, now this one I'm placing in this, kind of towards the center of the composition. Let's see, where did that go? It's like this. Okay, let's find that angle. I'm placing this at the kind of the center of the composition for a reason. Okay, it's not gonna be on the horizon. It's not gonna be that far out in the distance, but alright, there we go. If I don't like it, too bad. I'm just gonna have to go with it. Okay, actually that looks like a shipwreck to me. That's not too bad. Thankfully. I mean, there won't be any question. Like I said, I didn't want it to look like some kind of strange object out there. Okay, now I'm placing it in the center, just for some variation. So I get the continuity from the object itself. Okay. But here's my previous impressions of it in those compositions. Alright, so we have, it'll be like this. Okay, so we have left, right, and middle. Okay, so as we're flipping it. Now, normally my instinct would go left, and then this piece would have been more center, and this one would have been more right. So as we're moving, kind of that object kind of moves along, you know, where you go here, here, and then we flip that up and it's, you know, over that way. But we can go this, you know, kind of little left of center, right of center, and then center. Okay, with this one. All right, so that creates a little bit of variation. You know, we don't want it. I mean, you could, but in terms of, you know, sequencing, you know, it keeps someone's eye kind of wandering around a little bit, you know, to kind of break up the monotony of it. So you want the continuity of form, but not the monotony of, you know, too much commonality, you know, with the other pieces. Unless you're doing that for a reason. Okay, so we have our cove here. I'll bring in some other things. We have this palm branches, you know, fronds here, and I'll add some of that in. But we have our work cut out for us as far as creating a lot of color schemes, lighting schemes within the scene. And for me, the main thing about it is it's really not so much about the colors used in here, alright? I mean, it's important. And lighting, but it's kind of more the mood, alright? I want a different mood from these pieces, okay? This one's really foggy and it represents a certain time of day. This one, it speaks for itself in terms of the emotional quality of it. Now this one right here, you know, it's been supposedly a location that's sustained, you know, a castaway, probably a pretty young one at that, you know, for several years, so it, you know, it can't be too hostile of an environment, so we're going to do some sort of a tropical setting. I'm thinking about with, you know, instead of kind of a neutral, yeah, there's a little bit of warmth in here, but it's generally a cooler kind of look to it. We'll warm this up, alright? So I'm thinking tropical, you know, lagoon in here, blue skies maybe, something like that. And, you know, I'll do a little bit of variation in here in terms of values and whatnot, but for the most part I want this to be somewhat of a sunny day, and, you know, I don't know about tropical paradise. It's probably very difficult to live in there, you know, for anyone to survive, but it has to be enough where this little lone figure can do that. Alright, I'm thinking about some nice, that being said, I'm thinking about some nice billowing clouds. Yeah, I don't have them in this one, but in this one these clouds are rather kind of ominous because I stamped them black and they're in some kind of crazy color schemes right there. So let's just keep it nice and light, okay? In terms of our kind of emotional character of these clouds, and I'm just thinking light blue, alright? And we'll use the cloud cumulus here. The cloud cumulus is, it's soft and it feels kind of emotionally, I don't know, maybe safe, I guess you can say. It's also the bringer of fresh water too, which would be needed in a survival situation. Alright, so ink this up with a light blue, and I'm going to wipe off the edges here. I want this to be a nice, easy transition from one impression to the next, and I'll do several impressions of it across the top part of the scene. Okay, and this is done in a salvia blue. Just go with any kind of light blue dye-based ink. Okay. Summer Sky is a really great one. In Memento, we have Tumbled Glass and Distress. Any number of, dye-based stamp lines out there would be good. I don't see a whole lot of it there because the Palm Island is there. Now remember, dye-based inks are transparent, so if you stamp something over something that's darker, the darker thing is going to be the dominant, visual or color in that given space, right? Okay. Now what I am doing is I'm masking off this water down here because I don't want that cloud to come down into my open areas. I can have it go into the closed areas just fine. Closed areas meaning the silhouette areas. Okay. A lot of times I don't even bother kind of wiping off the perimeter, but these pieces are a little bit more, I don't know, I guess in-depth as far as composition goes, so I will spend, that, I don't know, 3 seconds to kind of wipe off the perimeter before I stamp it out. Okay. Alright, so we have our nice kind of billowy clouds in the background. I think I'm going to make some kind of little additional freehand drawings or textures, I guess, on those sails there. I want those sails to kind of look like they're in tatters, so I'll just kind of I'll just do like some little lines hanging down. Some of those sails are torn. That's why I kind of wiped off some of the this side of it where it shows, the sail to be, still crisp. Piece of fabric, a whole piece of fabric, I should say. Okay, just going to do something like that. Maybe there's some kind of ropes hanging down or something like that. I don't know, this is a little fine point Sharpie. Alright. Perhaps a little bit more tattered, kind of in here. I guess I should do a tear or something like that. Maybe with a white pen later or something like that. I'll put a hole in that shadow there. I don't know if I really want to do that though. Okay, so emotional tones, kind of light, airy, and warm, somewhat. Warm tone waters in here, maybe aqua colors. Okay, but I have this character that's going over here in the corner, alright? So, do I want him there or do I want him down here? Huh. Now I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'll put the character down here. Nah, it's a little bit rough in there. I think I'm going to put this character behind this rock. like it's standing on the, you know, kind of the backside of this rock in the water. I was thinking about putting it over here, but it might be a little bit too busy over there. I don't know if we'd see it as much as over here. Let's see here. What if I put it right on top of that rock? I think on the back side of this rock right here. Now, I'm trying to decide if I want to put them in right now or if I want to wait for later. I tell you what, I think I'm going to put them in right now. I rarely do that, but it's a really significant character in this composition scenario. I think I might want them in there right now. Alright, I want them on the back side of this rock, not standing way high. They're going to be on the next to the water so that they can you know, get closer to the fish or whatever they're targeting. Light, even pressure, you have that, you know, that spear, so it's very thin, so you don't want to put, you don't want to squash it. Okay. So here's her character right there. Close enough to the water, you know? I think so. Alright. Now, I do have those palm fronds to put in the foreground, but those ones I do think I'll leave for the end. But alright, so that little character is drying. There's a little bit of a wet ink in there, so I'm going to let that set up for a little bit and dry because I want that character to be nice and crisp. Same thing with, I just re-inked this pad, by the way, so I don't want to pick up any of the black ink that's still, there might be a drop of it, you know, on this. And I want to keep this fairly, as pure as I can. Inevitably, I might streak a little bit of that black, but it should be pretty set, especially if I give it a few minutes here. But crystalline blue, you know, aqua green, clear waters in there. And I want that to remain that way. I'm looking at my area right here. I think I'll have this kind of illuminated in here. The sky will be fairly light, and just a little bit of shading behind the shipwreck. And right in these rocks here, plenty of little shadow areas for the fish to hide. I might even put like a little shadow of this fish kind of swimming around in these waters. I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. Okay, so give this a few minutes and then we'll come back to it. Okay, I've allowed this to dry for, oh, I don't know, probably a half an hour or so. Did some other things while it was drying, but anyways, let's take a look at this again and kind of reiterate and kind of replan some of the kind of lighting strategies throughout this scene. I think, you know, it can be a pretty simple type of lighting scheme in here. We're probably looking at light in this center area right here, since the figure is not centrally located, but, you know, towards the center of the scene. Probably a little bit of a blue cap up here. We can see where the clouds end and where some blue sky would begin. And I'll probably carry that through the sky area, and I'll go with more of a kind of a sandier look on this area coming around this way. I'm not sure what color I'll do the rocks in at this point in time. Let's say that this is some kind of tropical themed scene, which, you know, it is, but well, you know, we'll think about these rocks maybe in terms of something volcanic, meaning something dark, even though I say that, then if these rocks were dark, the sand would probably be dark too, like black sand beach or something like that. But let's forget all of that type of detailing, and let's make the sand, you know, kind of more of a traditional, I don't know, beige, warm-toned sand, just to contrast against the rocks, you know. So that's again where you're kind of taking artistic license as opposed to saying, well, this in theory would be this color, and this one would be another color, so on and so forth, you know. Let's just go with what would suit the scene the best in terms of contrasts and color schemes and color harmonies and whatnot, and we'll go from there. Alright, so we're probably looking at working through a color scheme similar to something like this. I want things a little bit warmer, kind of this greenish, pale green color, and I have a turquoise. I'm not real happy with that turquoise from Marvy in terms of the color I want here. So, and this one's turquoise right down here. It's a little bit dark. I want the transitions from some tones in here to be a little bit more kind of extreme, meaning I'll move into some really light, kind of shimmery, warm-toned waters, and we want them to be very maybe inviting. Okay, so I'm going to take a look through and see what kind of colors I have in that spirit. This one, of course, is, you know, way too light, but blended over or layered over something like this blue, you know, we're not looking at something so, you know, day glow greenish, okay? Or a fluorescent green or something like that. So I'm guessing something like that throughout here. I don't know. I mean, things could change and whatnot. I see my tips here need to be washed off, so I'll go and do that, and we'll get on with some different types of coloring here. Okay, let's get to coloring here. I think I'm going to take this pretty slow and methodically, especially with this first color, just because I want to really get a feel of kind of the direction that I want to go in a nice kind of gradual manner. You can always add more. There's certain things you can do, not to remove ink, but to kind of figure out a remedy for areas that you don't like. But always better just to kind of just be a little bit more careful about the application of your color to begin with. Okay, this is a summer sky. It's very light blue. And I'm just going in here and filling in some area over my clouds. Filling in a little bit. Making my area, my tone around the clouds a little bit darker. That's as dark as it gets right there in this color. And it just makes the clouds stand out a little bit more billowy and white and illuminated. They're not really going to be illuminated unless you put some tone around them. One of the things is when you're kind of doing these sequential pieces, it adds a layer of or multiple layers of consideration in terms of I don't know, just various issues that can apply to the sequential piece as a whole, in terms of thinking about three different things, three different compositions, and how we want to kind of bring them together as one. And going back to what I was talking about before, the visual bridges, you know, kind of tying in certain kind of visual similarities between the different compositions, could be textural, could be color, certainly scale, you know, in terms of the shape of the scenes that you're working in. Doesn't mean when you're doing these kind of multi-piece concepts, everything has to be the same shape. Sometimes you do like a triptych, and the centerpiece can be a double-page spread, and the other two, you know, the lead-in and the conclusion could be, I don't know, smaller oftentimes. It just depends on how you want to do it, but there's, I don't know, there's no real right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what kind of bridges you want to build or create, or to just, I don't know, just placement for dramatic effect, you know. Like that. It'd be kind of interesting to do maybe a 5-panel piece where I do a smaller one, maybe a half size of this, or even smaller, and then you lead into your next one, and then you kind of build up to the climax, which is the, you know, bigger piece, and, you know, you can go, I don't know, like this one right here, you can go a smaller one later on. Like, it'd be interesting right here, we see this guy fishing, and, you know, your third piece could be something as simple as like a fish or something like that. And that would be kind of interesting, because it kind of ties it in with this one right here, in terms of the activity. Could be a coconut, who knows? I mean, it could be any number of things that you could do as far as visual bridges. Maybe something leading into this one right here could be something as simple as like a, I don't know, it'd be interesting to have like a ticket, you know, for a, you know, ocean voyage, you know, to the new world, or something like that. Or it could be kind of a ominous, you know, type of symbol for, you know, something to come. As a visual lead-in, I don't know. Okay, I'm just adding in some, you might notice, I don't know if you can notice it, but I'm leaving some areas light. Okay, so I'm putting some areas in the shadows right here. I'll do it on each one of these rocks. I'll make them a little bit darker. And when I say darker, I mean darker, but this color in general is not a dark color, but when you apply the color, of course it is darker than the white of the paper, so that's what I'm doing right now. We're starting off. That's how things really become very easy in terms of an application process, is if you take things just incrementally darker from where they exist. So it's white of the paper, you can go with something very pale, and you just work a little bit darker each color, okay? Adding some of these rocks, giving some tone to them. Alright, pretty simple. I might need some more of this, but it's pretty good as far as a start. Ship ended up being a little bit more effective than what I thought it would be. I used a lot more than I thought I would, but maybe that was it. I was kind of wondering if it was going to read as anything, you know, with just a little bit of the, you know, the timber or whatever sticking out of the water. Okay. Memento. Let's try a Salvia Blue, the number 60 Marvy. And I'll just kind of add it in roughly the same areas that I did with the Summer Sky Memento. But going back to that idea on, you know, sequential aesthetics, it's fun. It's not a kind of a, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a hassle to think about these things. It really gets you to think more, kind of like the next move type of thing. It's like chess or something like that. You know, it kind of expands your kind of, oh, I don't know, frame of reference, I guess. You know, and your considerations going into something. It kind of tunes you into thinking kind of beyond, you know, the single frame, and it gets you thinking about kind of like visual dialogue, you know, beyond a single composition. There's things that can be visual, and there's things, issues or whatnot that can be kind of representational, and those are fun kind of things to think about and to bring into your whatever frame, multi-panel scenes, multi-card scenes, whatever. And you can see we're just working with the blues right now. I haven't, you know, made it kind of that warm tropical tone yet, but that will come. Okay, I'm really using the edge of my applicator right now. Just going for those streaks, and you can see I'm kind of turning my card in the direction that will be a nice, smooth type of application, okay? I don't have to keep my composition upright for reference, you know. I don't need that right now. And it's just so much easier to do this type of motion when I have the page in such a configuration that's very ergonomic to my hand and wrist and arm. Okay, taking a look. things will brighten up in there when I start adding in the warmer tones. It's starting to look a little bit, oh, I don't know, grayish, but temperature will play a big role in the end result. Alright. I'm trying to think if I wanted to go on with my next color. I think I will. I'll go on with the Memento Bahama Blue. Good name for the color I'm using, but it's basically just a medium tone, pretty bright blue. It's a pretty neutral blue. Some people think it looks kind of more turquoise. I don't think it really does. If it had a little bit of green in it, then adding pink would look kind of weird. So you can move this blue into the violet hue just by adding some pink into it. If it were kind of more of a turquoise, I don't think you can really do that. It would look a little bit more muddy looking. Okay, that's kind of increased the intensity of the scene. You know, it's much brighter blue. It is darker, but it's brighter. Add some of it down in our water as well. Okay, we have our shipwreck right there. Right around the shipwreck, I should have added a little bit more of the dark, lighter blues too, but I'll kind of add some shading around this ship just to kind of give it a little bit more kind of anchoring, you know, having it set into something is kind of an important consideration. Okay, that's pretty bright now so far. It's still not warm, so we'll still have, you know, a lot of that to add. So far, so good. These rocks in here, I think I want to, I mean, I have them blue out there, but for the most part I want to make them kind of more black. think I'm going to add some gray tones to them. And I'll switch from my kind of blue tip to a clean tip right here. It's stained, but it's clean. This is a fairly light gray. It's the London fog. When I was a kid, one of my favorite things to do was to go to the beach and kind of just explore the tide pools. I used to like the sand too, but I really enjoyed going and looking at the tide pools more. Looking at all the different creatures that were in there, and I don't know, looking at crabs and going and exploring all the tide pools, looking at all the little fish and organisms trapped in the tide, trapped by the tide. Kind of walking around on them, getting your footing. But we used to go all the time. Very pristine too. When I say pristine, it's because not a lot of people went out there, because the beach that I used to go to was on Vandenberg Air Force Base, so you had to have base access. My dad worked out there, so we'd go out there and go fishing and clamming and abaloneing. Okay, getting those rocks kind of addressed. The rocks in the foreground, I'm going to try and give them a little bit of variation. I'm hitting the shadows with some of this gray, and I'll leave some of the lighter areas of the rock as is, the boulders. Okay. Yeah, it's getting there. Now I'm going to put a little bit of the shadows down here in the water at the base of some of these rocks. Okay, I'll just do it with the gray. I'll do it with some darker blues as well. But what you do is when you put a little bit of a shadow at the base of something, when you develop those shadows, you're giving the objects more weight and like visual weight, opacity. You're saying that they're just not outlines, you know, where light shines right through them. So little shadows can be very important. They can play a fairly big role in a scene. And it could be something that's very dramatic, but a lot of times it's just something that's very subtle. And shadows can be, you know, a lot of people think of shadows as being black, but they're oftentimes just kind of darker versions of whatever substance they're a part of. So let's say you have a blue shirt, your shadows in your blue shirt are probably going to be like a darker blue, usually. So as I look at this water here, it's just like it's somewhat like a fabric of water, okay? Like the surface. And I'm making my shadow areas, well, I'm going with the blue here, but I'll hit them with some darker blues going forward. Alright, I think that's what I'm going to leave it at for right now. Well, here, let me see something. I do have the Danube blue, and I guess while this blue is a little bit moist, maybe I will address some of it right now. Going in, kind of deepening some of my shadows. It's kind of fun to go in and kind of bring in kind of a definition to these waves. It's kind of when you start doing this type of or you know, with a lot of different media, it's very relaxing, and you know, I wouldn't say it's not like a super spontaneous exercise, so it's not precarious at all, and you're just watching your color schemes develop ever so slowly, and your lighting schemes especially. Okay, so it's kind of coming around. All right. Now let's take a look now, and let's introduce some warm tones into the scene. I'm not really done with the blue quite yet, but we'll be getting to that. Okay, let's address some of the sand. We'll have sand kind of coming around here, and they'll do a little bit of a wrap right onto those kind of more distant areas of the shoreline in those areas. Okay, desert sand. Perfect. Perfect name, right? For this scene. Alright, we'll introduce some of this in here, and we'll utilize it accordingly, okay? Meaning, I don't know if we'll use it everywhere. It's fairly light, so, you know, we can do a pretty good application of it, but we might not want everything to be, you know, uniformly applied. I want some variation in there, but if it's light enough, then, you know, you can kind of do the whole thing. But let's take a look. Okay, that's a pretty full saturation right there, and it's pretty light, but what I'm getting at is I might want some of the white of the paper still showing in my foreground some areas. So like right in here, this is pretty much applied all the way around it. But okay, now I'm going to start bringing in some of this warm tone into some of my rocks as well, okay? Just so that there isn't this kind of disconnect between the different objects within the scene. So apply some of this color right over the tops of my rocks, my blue rocks in other words. Let's see, things, they look a little bit more kind of resolved in my opinion when you do intermingle your temperatures within a scene. You can intermingle hue, but and our temperatures are really important, potentially important. Doesn't mean you can't do something all warm or all cool, you know. Night in the Antarctic or something like that. Okay, maybe it's going to be all cool tones. Who knows? But things just look a little bit more full, you know, when you have those changes in temperature. So I put a little bit here and there. Okay, so just all shades of blue. Now you have these rocks in here with a slight temperature change, okay? Okay, pretty good coating undercoat, desert sand, and let's see, I'm looking for my pale violet. Okay, would have to be I have a stack of Marvy pads, like 3 stacks of about 15 or so. A lot of those colors are duplicated, but of course, the color that I want is clear at the bottom of one of these stacks. Here we go. It's kind of just like the salvia blue from the Summer Sky Memento. This is just a very incremental, small jump from the previous color, okay? I can tell the difference a little bit. It's a little bit warmer. It's a little bit brighter of a color. But I do like having the Memento down because the Memento ink, it's a little bit thicker and it spreads out beautifully, especially on glossy cardstock, but it also works on matte cardstock. If you do this kind of process, you can really build up your colors and tones, going from something very gradual to something, a lot more intense and bright. On my rocks. Coming around ever so slowly. All right, I was thinking about maybe some brown, not this one, this is green. Maybe walnut stain or tea dye would be good for my sand. Just something kind of warm. I guess with the distress inks, it could have a kind of an aged kind of tint to it. A little bit warmer tone. A little bit more orange in it, I guess. Alright, now if I want this sand to be fairly light, it's important not to just tone everything out. You have to remember to leave certain areas at some point in time as far as like coloring goes, otherwise we end up kind of coloring in the whole thing. Oftentimes kind of an equal amount, which can be fine, but I usually want a little bit more variation. Okay, coming around. So it's a very light light value change, very minimal, value change. Okay, moving into a darker tone, this is walnut stain. Walnut stain is, it's a decent amount darker, so when you move into your darker tones, just take them in a much more gradual fashion, just to get a feel for how dark it looks. You might know what something color might look like done individually, but in our case we are layering it over the top of other colors, so it's not going to just be a pure version of that color that we end up seeing. So don't be afraid to kind of test things out a little bit and apply them accordingly. Okay, we have a little bit more tonal variation here, value variation. Okay, and it's getting a little bit darker, so just be careful about how much you apply, and make sure that you apply kind of the amount that you want. Maybe not overdo it too much. I say too much because I'd rather people kind of overdo things a little bit too much than to never get to, that ideal kind of stopping point within a given scene. Being too conservative and too careful. It's good to get in there and play around with things and to experiment and to test things, test the limits of your pieces and your techniques and your textures and colors and whatever you're doing. Okay, this is brown. Really moving up into kind of your medium tone, medium value, I should say, colors. The medium to darker tones are really good to kind of anchor your objects down once again in terms of creating shadows, anchoring down found compositions and objects within the composition. So again, it's a darker tone, so I'm going to apply some at the base of the trees like that. By going darker at the base of them, you're saying that, all right, those trees are, maybe casting some shadows. Okay. Now I'm being careful not to color everything out. Don't overlap everything that you've laid down, with the other colors, because you want to still have that variation here and there to represent lighting. All right. I'm going to try something. My inclination is I kind of went in the brown tones, right? Beige, pale orange, brown, distress ink colors, walnut stain tea dye. My inclination, and I still might use it, is to go to a darker brown. It's like beige, a little bit darker brown, medium tone brown to go to the darker tone. But I'm thinking in this one, I don't want this, the sand to look like dirt. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this is a beach scene. But so I'm thinking about adding a little bit of a tinge of a different hue and moving into the violets, okay? Because brown relates to like a violet because they both have red in them. Okay, so let's try some of that. Okay, I'll go with a very light one, this orchid right now. testing out how wet the pad is, relatively wet it is. Okay, can't really see too much of a change. I see a little bit. Oh, good. Okay, I'm getting some of this into my area that had a little bit of white too, so again, there's a little bit of variation now with some violet kind of intermingling with some of that brown tone like that. See that? And I'll create a little bit of a relationship between the background area and the foreground as far as the sand area goes. So that's a touch of a different hue in there. Just to hopefully add a little bit of variation. It kind of glows now too, because we're starting to introduce kind of analogous colors into that area, I guess. Analogous means next to each other, and as it applies to art, it'd be something like analogous colors on, say, the color wheel. Colors opposite from one another. I mean, next to each other on the color wheel, sorry. And when you get colors next to each other, what they do is if you apply them next to each other on here, they kind of create a color glow, or in this case, applying them right over the top of some colors already applied. Okay, alright, now let's start moving into, let's see, is it time? There's blue tones in there. Oh, good. I have a nice clean tip here. Let me use this tip right here. This one I think I used for my white pigment ink before. Okay, green tones. Let's warm up that water a little bit. Maybe make it look a little bit more tropical. I'm going with a pale green, something that's very light. And I'll just ever so gently and carefully apply it into the scene. I can already see it. It's kind of a nice warmth to it. I don't know, maybe it's not warmth, but it's a nice kind of a addition in terms of hue. What we're doing is we're taking something that's blue and tweaking it a little bit, making it more aqua and turquoise, for sure. Okay. It's really changed it, hasn't it? It's more of that aqua looking color scheme. Alright, let me try something here. I'll go with the yellow green. Fairly bright, but I might want a couple really warm areas and bits within the scene. It's kind of an intensity change as well. It's kind of creating a little bit of a glow down here. Again, blue and kind of blue-green are analogous, right? So I'm layering it right over the top of the blue. A little bit more tropical. And it's kind of warming it up. It's kind of matching the, you know, some of the areas down here and the warm tones down that way. Okay. This will look nice when I add my palm fronds, my foreground fronds into the composition. Thinking about what I'd like on some of these rocks, and thinking about what I could do them with. I'm wondering if some pens would be the thing to do it with, and not necessarily you know, a large applicator. Not that that's really large, it's like your fingertip, but I don't know, it's developing nicely. Gotta find my blue tip. Okay, there's my blue. Let's go in and let's deepen a couple more little shadows here, okay? I'm trying to think of what the color that I want to go with. Let's go with the blue. It's a fairly dark blue. It's real similar to the Danube blue, okay? The Marvy one's going to be a little bit thinner and that'll penetrate, but just use whatever dark blue you have. And see, mine, I have a pretty good amount of it laid down in here in terms of my undertones before I got to the dark blue last time. But if you kind of let things set up a little bit, it'll take to the paper easier. Sometimes you have to let your ink, you know, there's so much of a saturation of ink on here. Sometimes you have to wait for it to dry a little bit. Otherwise you're kind of wiping wet into wet inks, and sometimes it just doesn't want to transfer because it's like trying to, you know, have a wet applicator onto a wet surface. You know, you don't get a lot of that transferring of your media, so sometimes you have to let it dry. So the surface the surface will be a little bit more absorbent that way. Anchoring down my Palm Island a little bit more, with a little bit more shading right here and here. Okay, alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with black. Okay, I'll just go with the same black that I stamped out the composition with, or in. Just to anchor those things even more, so it's like if I whatever color I stamp out my imagery in, okay, or the darkest one that I happen to use, that's the color that I'll want to kind of finish up with in terms of kind of defining the darkest of the shadow areas in a scene, and it brings that continuity to all of the imagery used within this scene right here. Okay, so black images, we can add in some kind of gray toned, grayscale shadows into those objects. See that right there? Just that rock looks a little bit more rounded than, say, this one does. Okay. This one's stamped out a little bit lighter too, or quite a bit lighter, but let's go in and add a little bit of shading to it. Okay, now don't just color in everything. You have to look at the objects within your design. So you're doing a little bit of a selective kind of shading. See, my rocks in the foreground look a little bit more modeled now, I would think. Okay, we have some rocks over here too. They look a little anemic. So let's add some tone onto parts of it. Okay, up by my shipwreck. Okay, let's add a little bit of the shadows at the base of that. So it kind of sits into the scene a little bit more with a little bit of shading to it, or further shading, I guess, because we did add some of the darker blue tones in there, or might have been light and medium tones at the base of it. So you're just kind of building it up, just nice and incrementally. Anchoring down of the island, Palm Island. It's going a little bit darker in here than I initially conceived, but I kind of like it. I think it's, I don't know, what do you think? I think it's giving a little bit more form to things, and I don't know, kind of a mood, I guess. Alright, let's try this down in some of my rocks. I'll model my rocks a little bit more with some tone. Not putting it over the whole thing like I'm filling in a coloring book or something like that. I'm just making parts of them a little bit darker. Typically it's at the base of them, you know, if you're kind of have overhead kind of lighting and illumination. So like this over here, you just kind of add a little bit. Here we go. Okay, see this right here, this rock, it's kind of at the base of it, it's a little bit darker, but behind it, you know, I can put a little bit of tone like this and kind of make this foreground rock stand out a little bit more from a dimensional perspective. I don't know if we're making it look 3D, but certainly a little bit more round than before. Okay, kind of went out to the edge, and I thought that was important. That looks good. See, that looks a little bit more open. It looks okay, but I think kind of going out all the way out here looks better. I like that. Okay, that was black. Things are starting to look very developed down here, which is fine, but see the sky right up here? Let's go one step darker in my corners here. Just so I get a little touch of, you know, the same or closer intensity with objects down here. See how it's really pale? And it is a fairly bright color, but we'll just make it a little bit darker and a little bit brighter. Remember, bright is the intensity of something, not the lightness of it. Okay, so something a little bit brighter up here to make the sky area look a little bit more rendered. Okay, so see it's right here and here. Okay. We need something down here in the sand, don't we? I'm not quite sure what yet, but we'll figure it out. Maybe a little texture. Maybe I'll use my pebbles again. I don't know if it'd be in the sand, but probably not. But oh, I don't know. It works as a good texture. Maybe up here too. That area up there looks a little bit bare to me. Keep talking about decluttering, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. In terms of just my desk. Put in a little bit, a few rocks up there. Looks pretty good. Okay, yeah, excellent. Okay. There, like that. Let me do something too. I'm going to add a few of these rocks right here along the shores, if we can see under the water just a touch right in here. Okay, and I'll kind of render those a little bit more with some pen ink. All right, let's take a look at this color. I'm pretty happy with the waves, and I don't know. There's not too many waves in here, but the the water's surface in here, so I don't think I'm going to be needing to do anything, or I don't think I'll feel compelled to do very much in that area. But we'll see. So anyways, these are kind of some of the colors that I used in that water down there. So I might add a few more touches with that, with my alcohol pens. Let's see if I can get some other... Okay, this is a cool gray right here. I seem to be going back to those quite a bit. Here's another cool gray. Brownish gray. Good for my rocks, maybe. Foreground. Kind of rendering the rocks. I'm not coloring in the whole rocks. I'm kind of adding some tone down into the shadow areas of my rock. You want to make your rocks look nice and kind of round, okay? So you don't hit them over the whole thing like a coloring book. Like if this was a rock right here, I'm not going in and filling up the entire thing like that. So here's my rock, and you know, you might be doing something like this, and that would, you know, look like it's, you know, there's some lighting, you know, kind of aiming down like that. So kind of getting the base of some of these old rocks. Okay. Do the same thing with the rocks at a distance. You can put a little tone over some of them, create a little shadow down here. Some areas that you just can't get in sometimes with something like the stylus tool. That's when these can really come in handy. Pens, you can't beat them. Okay, that was my brownish gray. What a great color. It's very subtle too in some ways, but very effective in other ways at times. Okay, here's a cool gray number 5. I need to make room. I'm not getting claustrophobic here, but I can't move around at all. Okay. Or I can't move my scene around at all. things are looking a little bit more rendered with each color that I lay down, it seems. So it's going okay, then I guess we can keep moving a little bit. Here's a little bit of a blue tone. A little bit of a brighter blue in the next to the shipwreck in the shadows. Oh, couldn't remember what I was going to do. I noticed there was some little grassy, little bushy textures up in the Palm Island that I could add a little bit of a warmth into, a little bit of color. It'll be very subtle. This is a very subtle green, but I can add some of it out there in the distance. That green too, I mean, it'll be subtle, but it'll give it something in common with the surface of the ocean and that color up there. This green over that brown looks pretty good. Okay, this is where I'm going to apply some of this green onto some of my rocks. I think it might look pretty interesting. Who knows what it is? Maybe it's a little bit of seaweed or something. Algae, I'm not really quite sure. But whatever it is, it's growing on some of my rocks. Okay. Instead of lichen, boulders with lichen, it's boulders with seaweed or something. All right. Evaluation. There's a very bright blue. This is real similar to my light blue or the Bahama blue. Okay. Let's see if I put this in some of my darkest areas, what it would look like. It's pretty bright and fairly dark, so I need to be a little bit careful about it. But it gives a little bit more of an intense shadow area to some of my shadowed areas, so that might be good. A little bit of a brighter blue over some of my kind of gray applications or buildups. Alright, that didn't hurt. It's kind of glowing a little bit more. Alright. Trying to think about something I want in here. It might just be the palm frond, I'm not sure. Okay, let's see, some additional tones and textures now to be applied. Let's go a little bit more subtle than what we'll end up with. This is a very pale blue. Here's some different colors out of our color scheme. These are the Shuttle Art gel pens. They're probably about, I don't know, like 10 cents each or something like that. Pretty amazing. Okay, now let's see. I'm going to add in some, maybe I will. Can't even see it. Specular light. Okay. Specular light is light that's brighter than white. Okay, this is really subtle. Okay, I don't know if you'll be able, we will be even able to see it. We'll see. Okay, I need some space here. It's time that I clean off, I don't know, I have a gigantic pile of stamps on my desk here from all the scenes that I've been doing lately. Okay. I'm adding in these little streaks. Normally I add in a lot of little dots and so on and so forth, but let's go along. Let's do a few streaks with these pens here, okay? So there's kind of horizontal areas in here. Now this is blue, so it's not going to stand out very much, but that's perfect for me because it's allowing me to get a little practice in where you can't really see it too much. I put it, you know, this blue is a little bit more transparent than it is opaque. A little, I guess, translucent, but I think you get the colors showing through it, in other words, which is good because it kind of blends in with your surrounding area a little bit more. But if you want something to really stand out, then you have to go to something that has more opacity to it. Anyways, but I'm just trying to bring in some textures here. I'm doing this from something it'll be darker than the white pen that I'll end up using on here. But it's good to start off with something a little bit more subtle. And again, it goes back to that kind of idea that you'll have a lot more control over it if you start it with something that doesn't, you know, read quite so much, you know, on the paper. So just like starting with really light tones in your coloring process, in the highlighting process, you start with something a little bit more kind of darker and more maybe transparent. It doesn't show up as much. Little ripples back here, kind of bringing in a little bit of a little bit of visual interest. That just bringing out the ripples a little bit more, or the little, I don't know, surge, you know. Same thing over here. on the design itself, there are lighter areas, and that's what I'm just kind of bringing out. So I'm not just totally inventing them, you know, here. When I'm doing these streaks, I can see there's lighter areas, and if I've left it light, or lighter, in terms of toning, then I just kind of go in and reiterate it again with a little bit of this line. It could be a few little dots if you want to, like that. Oops, sorry. If I zoom out, it's really hard to see anything that I'm doing, but when I zoom in, just covering such a small area of the scene, so I'm worried that you won't be able to see it. I have to keep looking up the screen, making sure I'm working in the field of view. Apologize for the low production value of these videos. Okay, that was kind of a turquoise-ish green, very pale, okay? Okay, here's kind of a much brighter green. I don't know if I'll add too much of that. Maybe in those areas that are kind of, you know, greenish. Specular light, light that's brighter than white. I've always remembered that from my photography teacher. My photography teacher in college was the like a county I think she was like the crime photographer. She'd, you know, go out on scene and document you know, I guess the evidence or whatever, the scene of the crime type of photographs. It's kind of interesting because I took a diving class, you know, like scuba, and that guy was the dive inspector for the county of Los Angeles, so he would have to go and investigate diving-related deaths. All right, looking a little bit more shimmery. I like the way that surface is looking. I thought I would be doing more with, I don't know, some pens and things like that, but so far so good. I mean, it looks pretty good just as is. I'll be adding a few more things to it, but I don't know, I like what I see, I guess. Okay, now I'm looking at this area down here. My sand areas, I'm just pulling out these pens right here. These are kind of in the spirit of the sandier types of areas within the scene. Okay. I'm going to warm up some of the sand a little bit, just in terms of temperature. This is a very subtle color, biscuit. Okay, that was the biscuit brownish gray again. And I'll just add, it's a little bit dark. I'm kind of creating a little bit more of a relationship between the sand and these rocks in the background. Everything's so rendered back there and with some volumes. So I'm just kind of going in. I wanted to add a little bit more kind of tones into my sand here. And they're easy enough to do with very pale toned, pale value pens, okay, within that color scheme. Okay, so something like that. There's a lot of alcohol that I'm laying down here, and I still have those palm fronds to put in here. I'm hoping that they'll apply over all this alcohol ink, so I'll do it probably almost certainly with the VersaFine inks, something nice and thick. So something I'm thinking about ahead of time. All right, let's add some little bit of special effects, After Effects. I don't know if they're special effects, but add some texture, and I'm going to do that before I do those foreground elements. Okay, we'll grab our miraculous tool, the cotton swab, and I will go for my pigment ink pad. I want it fairly subtle. I don't want to, we're not going for that London fog type of thing, you know, in that first scene, okay? But I think this scene, you know, couldn't hurt to have a little bit of a pigment ink, white pigment ink, kind of foggy lighting effects in here. So just smashing this down in my thing. This tip right here is really loose. If you want a soft application of that paint ink, then you have to go with a very soft applicator, right? Makes sense. You can see this one's fairly frayed, okay? Now, I say this in every video, but I have a really great pad here because it's very dry and it's very, there's hardly any ink on here, so it's kind of exactly the consistency I want. If you go with a pad like this one's really wet, and this one's brand new here, so I don't want a bunch of balls of ink everywhere, so you want a very light application, okay? And when I do that, I'm not trying to cover up everything, okay? I'm just applying a little bit here and there, okay? Usually it's like part of a design somewhere, like see these rocks right here. If I want to create a little bit of variation around it, and I can just kind of tweak it a little bit. See, there's a little bit of light down here, so I can do this. If it was really dark, then sometimes this looks kind of out of place. But see this right here? I'm kind of altering a little bit that rock right there in terms of how it's a little bit diffused now. See that? Where things kind of get a little bit away from people is when they see something and they think, okay, I have to apply this over that whole object. You know, you're doing it in partials, okay, usually. And I find that to be the most effective way to, I don't know, utilize this type of texture is to use it, you know, I don't know. I wouldn't say sparingly, but selectively for sure. See that how it just kind of makes that rocks look a little bit different, okay? You can do it here in the foreground as well if you want to, okay? Let's say this area right here. I'll create a little bit more of a transition between this boulder right here and these background rocks. Okay. Or I can put a little bit on that foreground rock, like it's capturing some of that light. Okay. Put a little pigment ink at the base of this rock, you know, but not everywhere along the entire base of the rock, okay? It just kind of makes it look a little bit more dimensional. There's more of a kind of a textural variation. You have something that looks fairly soft. Rock looks both soft and crisp, okay? Let's do the same for this background rock. Okay. See, it's just kind of subtle. It's right there. It's not back here. You have that ship out here, okay? Put a little bit of light on some of that shipwreck. Okay, see how that's kind of capturing that light now, and even this area in here, you know, there's some light kind of shining on these parts of the shipwreck. You can even do it to, you know, some of these little waves here. Put a little bit of pigment ink on parts of them. I'm kind of breaking things up a little bit. Everything is very crisp in certain areas, you know, just with all the inks laid down and alcohol pen work, you know, details and whatnot. And it looks okay, but I want that a little bit of variation to be kind of introduced into these areas. Okay, I think it makes for a little bit more of a rich kind of a textural palette when just things are a little bit more varied. Okay. So it seems kind of strange. You work all these little details in there, and then you just kind of, you know, knock them down. But I don't see it as getting rid of anything. You know, I'm not getting rid of anything that really that you still can't see. Okay, if I put this over it, it just subdues some, you know, little marks in here, and to me it looks a little bit more illuminated too. If you have some lighter kind of effects in here, like this light, you know, see this island right here, okay, the Palm Island. See how dark that is right there? But see if I just kind of laid some ink over the top of it, like that. Now it looks like kind of light is hitting it. There's that kind of sea mist or whatever. I mean, it doesn't have to be like some beachy scene to do that, something like that, but see this right up here, how it's all crisp. If I just kind of knock it back a little bit, it just seems a little bit more distant, you know, and illuminated and textured. There's palm fronds right up here. I could put a little bit of light onto them. Okay, just by knocking, you know, touching them up a little bit with some, just a very, very pale application of pigment ink. That. See, here's the difference between this Palm Island right here, okay? You see that? There's some variation. You look in the bushes and whatnot. And here it is over here, very crisp. Looks okay too, but you do that, and it just seems more finished. Now let's do some on this one too, okay? It's like some lighting is coming through, maybe. Some lighting on my trees, or on the stalks maybe, or something. Very textured. In some ways, adding this in here too, it kind of softens a lot of the edges, and for the character in our story here, it's, I know you add all that type of texturing and things like that, and I don't know, it kind of takes the edge off some things, and it makes for a kind of a more welcoming environment, perhaps. Put some of this on his spear. Like, you know, it's kind of illuminated a touch. I was wondering if I can add in that shadow of a fish. All right, where did my, oh, here we go. Let's do something with this fish here. Let me do a test thing. I'm going to do it in blue and black, okay? Go a little blue, a little black, do that, and I'll go second impression. So blue, black. I want it really subtle, okay, so it's right down there. And I'll put another one. I want these to be like, you know, it's almost like if you didn't see this video, you wouldn't even notice they were there, okay? So those are in there, but I'm going to kind of subdue them a little bit more with some additional pigment ink over the top of it. I just want the forms to just be fairly discernible. Okay. Something very subtle. Okay. All right. Let's go to some white gel pen work. I'm really spending quite a bit of time on this piece. I guess, I don't know, I guess maybe because it's a big scene anyway, for me. But it's also the third of a final piece. You want, you know, you kind of want to make a somewhat of a statement here. You want to finish something well. In theory, if it's a sequential piece, you know, it's the last thing that, you know, the viewer will see. Putting little splashes right around my rocks down here. This old pen here is from Shuttle Art as well, and I have no idea the point size, but it's really dinky. But it's perfect for your very, very subtle subtle details. you ever add too much of the white pen, you can just wipe it right on off. It's no big deal. It's very forgiving as a medium. Or as far as a technique. Bringing these little areas to life. See, those ripples right there. See, they're in the design, so I'm just kind of, doing the same thing in those design areas. Here's this little crest right here. Here's the shadow. And again, that's in the design itself. See, here's my little fish, if you couldn't see them before. But I don't want them terribly visible. Okay. I just want to give our little character a little bit of food. Okay, that was my shuttle art. I don't know. I don't know what nibs, what roller size it is. If it's a 0.7, it acts more like a 0.5. Now this is a 1.0. It's the Uniball Signo 1.0 pen. It's always been a very good performer. It's like a Japanese, it's Mitsubishi Pencil Company Limited. Alright, so these ones are probably going, maybe we'll get a pretty narrow one out of it too, but I'll probably start giving me some larger little round dots, but also I'll put those in my lighter areas. put some of this in nice sand dunes as far as the texture goes. Okay, I think that should just about do it as far as my little special effects go. It's time to pull out the VersaFine. And let's start thinking about some final touches as far as imagery goes. Okay. Something like this palm frond looks really big, I know, but it will give us some scale. Okay. And depth within the scene. Everything's fine as is, but I think we could use something really close up to us, okay? And it'll push the field of view within the scene even more, which I think it'll look good, you know. Alright, now let me do a test print. Okay. Looks good. I'll go about right here. And what we have is a repetition of, I wouldn't say it's a repetition of form, but it's a repetition of kind of theme in terms of, you know, the palm trees in the background, and you have this big palm frond in the foreground right here. And I'm doing it in the VersaFine because it's very thick, and I don't think I'll have any problem with it stamping right over the top of things like my alcohol ink applications. Okay. See that? Maybe things are in threes. Maybe I'll do a little tiny bit of one right here. Okay. Looks a little imbalanced, doesn't it? So that's why I'll put another one out this way. I don't have another frond facing the other way, so I'll kind of keep going with this theme in terms of the way it's, you know, the angle. Okay. Something like this. Okay, let's take a look at that and see how that will read. It looks okay. Yeah, might want another one out here, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. I wasn't going to do it, but I think I do need a little bit more of it right over here. Okay. And we'll try to vary it a touch. I'll go a little bit right over here. Okay, I think that'll do it. Boy, yeah. That added in quite a big foreground. I think that works. It's given it a little bit more depth. Certainly visual space, certainly texture, contrast, continuity between foreground and background, fronds in the background, or trees, palm trees in the background, fronds in the foreground. We have our character there. Trying to think if I need anything else. I think that'll do it for me on this scene. Let's take a look at it. It's so huge. Look at those little fish there underneath him. Foreground. Okay. Kind of bending this so you can kind of see it without the glare like that. Alright, there's the third piece in our scene, in our story. It's a story about kind of going off to the new world, unforeseen tragedy, but it's about survival as well. And maybe, in some ways, I mean, he certainly doesn't have his companion there. But in some ways, just found some bit of paradise, his own paradise there, and the little figure looks to be, older than the character in this piece right here. Of course, it's hard to tell because they're terrified. But let's take a look at these pieces here. All at once, okay. Let's see if I can get them all on the screen. I have a wide-angle lens on this, but I have to go even higher. Okay, let's see. Ew. That ink is really wet. I have to be careful with those fronds. Touching those fronds, they're super, super wet. Okay. Boy, I have to go a bit higher than this. Okay. Now this isn't how, you know, they would get displayed. It would be one after another, but we're looking at this in terms of linking it up, in terms of kind of visual dialogue. This one really, you know, it stands out quite a bit for various reasons in terms of compositional structure and everything like that. Color scheme, whatever. It's supposed to, though, you know, it's supposed to be kind of like, you know, a scene gone haywire. But we have, you know, somewhat of a bridge between the three different scenes, certainly because of the format, the elongated format. The ship, you know, going from here to here to here. And to me, I mean, that is obviously the same ship as the other ones, but I don't know. To me, it looks different. To me, this one even looks bigger. You know, it looks like it's closer to us because of the value that it's stamped in. It's stamped in something very dark. That one's really diffused back there, and of course, this one is just a piece of it. But you know, I don't know. I guess there's a decent amount of continuity, certainly from the sea and the horizon, working in each one of these, but different characteristics, you know, different character to each one, and that's what you want from your stamps. You want your stamps to, especially in scenic stamping, just depending on how you utilize them, color, theme, certainly compositions, the way that you would use them, media, difference in media, but you know, here's this Seaside Cove right here, and it looks, you know, similar to this one right here, but you change the color scheme around. You go from something that's fairly cool and subdued and subtle to something very warm and maybe emotionally more inviting or something like that. You take that ship right there and, you know, it's really a very forced type of relationship or variation between working listing and crashing and, you know, sunk, you know, basically there on the out there on the reef, you know, but very different in terms of the look there. But anyways, that's what the fun thing about stamping to me, and scenic stamping, this whole scenic stamping genre, is that, you know, ideally your stamps are kind of like chameleons, you know. They can be utilized for whatever type of mood or composition you want to utilize them for, okay? And that's the whole key to really kind of exercising your creativity and pushing the usages of all the various designs right here. This one right here, that rocky waterside, has the pine trees on it and things like that, but on this side I just didn't utilize them, and I put that row of houses on there instead. Here's this boulders with lichen down here. You wouldn't find lichen, you know, in the ocean, you know, type of scenario down here, but you know, they certainly can be used for your ocean scene and shoreline type of scene, and, you know, I really utilized just a certain portion of them in the smaller version on the scene right down here. So, you know, this right here is a very similar design to these ones out here in the distance, and the repetition of form, you know. But to me, I mean, that boulders with lichen there, the two larger ones, look different than the 1, 2, 3, 4, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think 6 impressions of it in the distance like that. And they're all roughly the same shape and stuff, but it isn't too obvious that they're the same things. Fronds here in the foreground, just used at different angles and different heights, you know, to kind of to hide the fact that it's the same frond used over and over in repetition, okay? And, you know, something like that Palm Island in the distance. I mean, yeah, it's the same design, but, you know, use it a little bit more on this side, you know, bring it into the scene a little bit more. Maybe one's a little bit higher or lower than the other one, just to create a little bit of that variation right there. So that's what we, for me, I think that's, you know, the ideal usage of the designs, you know, to really vary how they're used. Just changing from using them in their entirety to portions of it, you know, for one, just in terms of the composition. And of course, that doesn't even take into consideration, you know, various aspects like media and how you would utilize them with the different media, giving them kind of an extended range of available usage for you. So I always say that I think I'm just scratching the surface of what can be done in scenic stamping and with all of these designs like that. So I've been doing these scenes for, you know, quite a few years, and like even in this scene right here, I've utilized boulders with lichen in a completely different way than I have in the past. The snow banks here in the foreground to create these sand dune types of things, and I really like the pebbles back in here and, you know, a bit down here in the water. It was a good learning experience for me. So several different types of things in this scene. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the scene. Super long. I don't know if you've really managed on kind of sitting through this one. I don't know how many viewings you had to do it through, but if you did it, thanks so much for watching and tuning into the channel, and I hope you enjoyed the scene.